Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Digitata Download. This is the podcast where we talk to knowledgeable people about what they do for a living and learn about what makes them tick and what's going on in their industry. Today we are really lucky to have John Payne, who is the Principal Analyst at Pueblo Technology Group. It's great to see you, John. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Gaz. Pleasure to be here.
I should say that this episode is brought to you in conjunction with Aeroparker, which is our sister product. And the reason why we're talking to John is because we have a mutual interest in airports and airport operations in the USA. John, where are you at the moment in the world?
I'm in the Mojave Desert near Los Angeles.
So tell me a little bit about your background then. So what do you do over there at Pueblo Technology, and how did you come to be founding that company? What led you there?
Sure. Started out in doing IT, ICT work in big MIS, I'll call it, glass house stuff with big IBM mainframes back in the day. Worked in multiple verticals, defense with Lockheed Martin, then moved over and became a network architect for Charles Schwab Financial Services, then moved over to DHL and did logistic work as a network architect for DHL Worldwide, and then jumped into startups. So went to small companies as either a biz dev person or a technical manager of engineers. Went back and forth. It was really fun and interesting. Took a year off and then became the CIO for SFO, the International Airport in San Francisco.
Right.
Did that for 10 years and then decided to open up my own company and advise to the industry. So what I love doing is working as a management consultant in public sector technology, bringing what private sector has done into public sector and trying to improve basically efficiencies of an operation. The shorthand is public sector has a lot of interesting constraints when it comes to people and skills and unions and budgets and CapEx versus OpEx and oversight. And all of those things are really interesting to try to manage through when it comes to technology. Privacy concerns, security concerns. It's a very large set of constraints that you need to focus on. And what the shorthand is, I try to give an agency director, a mayor, someone who is an elected responsible party, the best return on their dollar investment in ICT. So that's the shorthand.
So what at that point is quite a good place to point out an interesting distinction of the airport community in America as opposed to Europe is very much a public sector endeavor, isn't it? For the most part.
It is. I may get in trouble, but I think that a lot of American airports are following the European and the Canadian model in around where they're, I'll call it quasi-public, semi-public. They need to serve all traveling passengers and the public equally, but there is a sense of more commercial driven, more segmentation of services for different kinds of passengers. It's very different in the States, and also because of the geography of the States, we have huge distances here, and their airports tend to be local entities, so they are managed as city agency departments. There are very few that are non-public. So DFW, as an example, is a authority, which is a different jurisdictional organizational structure. Most airports are agencies of a city-run government elected by a mayor. So they have oversight boards that are appointed by mayors, sometimes elected, but the politics of an airport is very local. It's like a school board.
Yeah.
It makes for interesting times.
Well, there's usually a mix over in Europe and the UK as well. There's definitely a mix, but it does seem to me, and I hope you forgive me for saying this, that the way that airports operate in Europe and the UK, they perhaps been a little bit quicker to embrace digital technology, things like pre-book parking, which obviously we're interested in, and other such things. And it seems to me that America's kind of seen a massive rush of that recently. Would that be fair to say?
So that's absolutely fair to say. I think American airports, especially the technology leaders, look at a bit of envy to Asia and Europe when it comes to, in the UK, Heathrow is a leader, Manchester is a leader. You've got great airports, Schiphol, Vienna, Geneva. I mean, you've got some really good airports in Europe. And I think we do look at both those airports, Singapore, Incheon, Hong Kong, as leaders when it comes to applying technology to specific business problems. So there's a great collegiality across airport operators and managers and the technical side to kind of learn from each other, especially now during COVID. I mean, after 9/11, after SARS, now during the pandemic, we're learning from each other on how to best apply technology to the problems. I think one of the differences is, I think we were slower on the North American side to move from a landlord orientation to an operational orientation. I think we've made that shift, but because we are public sector, because we do spend a lot of technology under usually an expansion of an airport, either a greenfield airport, a renovation of a terminal, the addition of a terminal, that kind of thing, and technology usually follows that. We've had more of a landlord orientation. I think that's gone, but now we have to catch up. And so I think we've done some good work, but clearly what you folks do in Europe and what's done in Asia, you're great leaders, and we learn from you.
But I think, as America does, I think now that the kind of the floodgates have opened, I think it seems to be a real acceleration in terms of operation of the airports that's happening. You mentioned COVID, you mentioned SARS, but I was going to ask if there was any particular trigger for that. But have you already covered that, or is there another thing that might have just triggered that kind of acceleration of a shift towards embracing digital technologies?
Well, pre-COVID, I think public sector was slow, understandably and probably appropriately, slow to embrace the whole consumerization of IT. The other drivers are being able to utilize location and knowledge about the customer, in this case, the citizen, to enable new services and features. I think one of the drivers was the movement away from heavy CapEx AIP funding, airport improvement program funding, and the desire to, again, I think, move toward more Asia, European models when it comes to food and beverage and retail revenue. So traditionally, as a landlord, you took rents, which was great, and you had landing fees, and that was kind of the way we viewed the world for a lot of the past century.
Sure.
The AIP grant funding model started to go away, and we realized that non-aeronautical revenue is becoming far more important to us from an operational funding standpoint. That, combined with the ability to target, focus, segment our passenger traffic, and be able to cross-sell and upsell things like a present for someone going home, etc. All of those things are time and place and very much driven by where you are at the moment. And the introduction of the smartphone in 2007, combined with big data, combined with ad-based business models, changed everything. And I think all of those were drivers, and it just got accelerated during the pandemic. So with the advent of COVID, everything immediately, we had to go touchless. And there's only the only way to go touchless is with the mobile device that you have in your hand. So that, a lot of things, a perfect storm, if you will, of what was driving us into a lot of activities that used to happen traditionally on airport are now happening off airport, positioning the passenger and the meters and greeters to be able to kind of perform the same function, but in a new way. So all those things I think have combined.
Yeah, it's kind of the old way to increase well, the standard way to increase non-aeronautical revenues, especially through retail and F&B, is dwell time, right? So get people there early, have them spending lots of time browsing the shops, getting them spending. But obviously now that's the last thing you want. You want people through as quickly, touching as little things as possible. So it's really difficult for airports at the moment, as we know, as well as having fewer passengers. You need to make more revenue from fewer passengers, but also in new ways, because you can't count on things like dwell time and all that kind of stuff. So who's doing a good job? Has anyone found their feet particularly, or where do you think this will lead us? How can airports make more money from fewer passengers?
I think basically convenience, right? So I think think about when you travel, you have a different set of personas when you travel. So when you travel in your profession, so you're a road warrior, you're traveling and convenience is a huge issue for you. You're trying to maximize your time. Probably I'll use myself, and I think this will be familiar to a lot of our listeners. When you're on a business trip, although they're infrequent now or they don't happen now, you maximize every moment of the day. So you are always late. You're always running a little behind because you're cutting it close. And you would like to ensure that you know exactly the time it takes to do what it is you want to do. When it comes to travel, am I on time? Have they delayed? Have they switched the gate? Even if I know my airport, if it's going from Terminal X to Terminal Y, Gate X to Gate Y, that's a longer trip. Can I make it? Can I get in? Can I get the seat that I want? There are a number of things that you want to know from a convenience and from an efficiency standpoint as a business traveler. Mm-hmm. Similarly, if you're traveling for leisure with family, you'll do anything to not have to schlep all of your luggage around in multiple luggage carts if you've got children, right? You want to make it efficient. You want to be safe. You want to get through security. If there's something you can do to prearrange this, that would be ideal. So I think the kind of the overriding initiative that airports and all other suppliers are thinking about is, how can I derive revenue by making the travel experience for both the professional work travel versus the leisure business vacation travel as safe, as secure, and as efficient? What is the customer journey? So we come back to the customer journey. Who is supporting that journey from an airport perspective? Where are the touch points? Where can you reasonably be offered offers that will make your life easier, happier, more convenient? And where do you not want to be bothered? So there's a lot of deep analysis. We've done some analysis, but I think as an industry in general, we need to do better analysis of where those touch points are and where are there opportunities to generate revenue, because they're absolutely there. Going out a couple of years, I want to be separated from everything, including my carry-on. I simply want my carry-on to be above my seat when I get into the plane. I want to pop it open, or I want to see it as I walk in. That would allow airlines to be able to board in half the time. It's a huge issue for everybody. So how can we do that? Those are some of the things that we're thinking about.
And who's doing a good job over there? Who do you look at in the US and think they're the guys that are doing a good job, and this is what that's interesting? Or maybe it's the people who are listening to you the most, John. Maybe it's that. Who's to look at over there?
Well, I think I would insult one of my airport clients or prospects if I named anybody, and I don't want to do that.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah, I think, but I'll use somebody overseas. I think, Singapore does a wonderful job. Dubai does an excellent job. I think Heathrow does an excellent job. But what you find when you look at any airport is it's a multi-pronged problem. And so they'll solve one piece of it. The really hard part, and I don't think anybody would say they're doing this well yet, is if there are 5 points to the star or 10 points to the star, it's such a complex problem that nobody is doing all of those well. So I think we're all trying to put in place tools, techniques, organizational changes, technology that will give us a platform to address 10 points of the star. So let's say there's 10 points that we all have to do at a level 8
Mhm.
that will make us really good. We're still putting in place all the brick and mortar to be able to do that, speaking metaphorically.
I like what you were saying before, that it's about convenience for the traveller, because everyone, and I think the new thing, the other thing to consider is the feeling of security and safety, which is more important than ever.
Yeah.
So if you, those two things together, you're talking about a really kind of comfortable, convenient, safe traveller experience, and obviously that's priority number one for airports. But at the same time, you've got to find out, okay, let's provide this seamless on and offline journey for the traveller all the way through, and then let the touch points. Let's find the touch points, and let's kind of naturally pick out the points where we can provide more services and also make more money. But I like the idea of that coming naturally. Do you know what I mean? Of studying that. What's the perfect journey? And let's study that perfect journey and go, oh, there's an interaction point. There's an interaction point, rather than trying to force it.
Yes.
And I think what you were saying before makes a lot of sense to me.
The traveler, will have different attributes and requirements based on the type of travel you're performing.
Sure.
And not every business trip is the same. You may be traveling with a colleague one day and by yourself another day. You may be traveling in a group to attend a presentation. Ditto with personal travel and family. Spouse only, spouse with children, spouse with 2 of the 3 children, etc. There may be disability issues that you need to address. I think we need to take a much more refined look at the same person and how they travel. That ability to segment on the same person depending on the type of travel they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think we also, and we're starting to do this now, this is a huge issue. It's debatable how safe plane travel is, and I won't get into that, but it's not just safety at the airport and in the plane. It's really around the entire end-to-end trip, going and coming back. And the point's been made, I think, by people that study this intently, that yes, the airport can be made safe. Yes, the airplane can be made safe. The issue is, when you travel, you are moving into time zones that are not familiar. You're now tired. You're now working very hard. You're in a different climate. You're eating different food. And then you're coming back tired. So the issue is the entire trip itself. And can we create corridors, travel corridors, that adhere to a set of standards that make it safe? So I think, a broader industry look at the problem and a more coordinated look, again, back to that platform that allows coordination across all the entities in the travel matrix that will make it safe for people in a particular corridor. So between a particular region and another region in Europe. Those are the big issues that we're tackling now.
That's great, and that's really nicely and succinctly put as well. Let's move on to look at airports as an entity themselves. We deal with airports and as an organisation, both you and I do, and I'm really interested in how we facilitate that change, that shift towards embracing the technologies you're talking about, looking at the customer journey as a whole, because quite often you find lots of different heads of departments, each with their own agenda, and who do we have to corral to kind of who are the key players in the airport structure to get people to embrace the kind of thinking that you're talking about?
Sure. I think it's still useful to think about the traditional map of an airport, where you've got curbside, terminal side, land side, terminal side, air side. I think if you vision those 3 blocks and then you add in, I'll call it pre-land side or pre-curbside, which would be leaving the home or the office, wherever your first point of departure is from a personal perspective. And then you look at post-air side. Think about weather diversions and heavy weather that's going to be coming at us probably for the foreseeable future across the world when it comes to climate change. If I take those 3 blocks and I create 5 blocks, one before terminal and curb and one after airside, I think what we want to do is map that customer journey based on the personas, both inbound and outbound, to the enplaned passenger and then to the deplaning passenger across those 5 segments, and then look at the journey for each, throw the persona against it, family, business, etc., and then look at, okay, who do we want to make responsible at our airport for enplaned passenger of a particular persona? So, yes, you are responsible for the road warrior. Who are they? Where are they going? What are they doing? Are they happy? Are they not happy? Why? And what can we do about it? And what can we not do about it? What do we need a stakeholder to assist in? How can we generate information about it when they're unhappy that would be new to the stakeholder that could make them happy? How do we add value in that overall chain? And then somebody else takes the deplaning passenger and the person with some physical disability and the person that does not speak the local language. So there's an endless stream of data that we can collect, analyze, and improve our airport performance, and then improve the performance of our stakeholders. And that might be information that has monetary value to that stakeholder because they just don't have access to it. Or we could trade that information with the stakeholder because they have information that we desperately want. Read airline and deplaning passenger. I think a practical implementation of what I just said would be smart parking. Recently completed a project that I did. So parking is something that seems mundane. Either I do long-term parking or I do short-term parking. Actually, the parking products, and again, I think Europe has done a superb job, as well as Asia, when it comes to creating a complex set of parking products. So parking is not just short-term or long-term. And what I think North American airports are realizing is that back to non-aeronautical revenue and generating revenue, there are a variety of different parking products that one can create, but it requires a set of technologies to be able to create them. So with COVID, there is a strong desire to drive your own personal car or not car share. So now parking spaces, once travel comes back, are at a premium. And clearly, again, if I'm looking at efficiency, that road warrior traveler, and I travel on a Sunday night or Monday and come back on a Friday, and I cut it close on timing, and I want to reduce that dwell time that you spoke about at the very beginning, I'd like to park as close to my departing gate as possible. So there's a particular set of spaces that are of interest to me that have value that I'd like to be able to reserve over and over again. I'd like to be able to do that tied to my reservation with my favorite airline. So wouldn't it be nice when I book my flight and say, yes, I'm going to go at Monday at 10 o'clock, that the airline connected to the airport's parking system and was able to reserve my standard space. I have a preference of floor 3 because that's where the walk bridge is, space 23, or space 23 to space 30. I'm okay either way. Oh, by the way, I just got an EV, so I would like a charging, I want a fast charger because it's a quick trip, or I'm happy to have a lower priced charger that'll take longer to charge the car. Oh, and by the way, I've got a hot date right after I come back, and I want that car detailed, gassed up, cleaned, and thinking out there, wouldn't it be nice if I got some flowers in the passenger seat when I pick him or her up? So there's all these amenities that can be provided as options. And from an airport perspective, I'd like all of that on one bill to the customer.
Yeah, of course.
And I'd like to know, with privacy accounted for, am I doing that over and over again for a particular class of customers? So maybe that's the class of customers that would like a year subscription to the Financial Times, etc. So I've now got an opportunity to give a much better experience. I've got cross-sell and upsell opportunities, et cetera. You can do this with valet parking. You can do this with a variety of different things. There are discounts that can be provided. Disabled parking could be expanded or contracted based on a particular event that's occurring. There is commercial management of the parking fees, where during a big sports playoff or final, there are different prices based on that. There could be different prices based on weather, back to climate change. So there are a number of things that you can do with technology that make it elastic when it comes to both pricing, and you would understand what your costs are.
Yeah,
You'd be able to automate and drive down costs associated with revenue going up. So your margins now are increasing rather than decreasing.
Yeah, and that actually leads us nicely. When you first started talking about this, you're talking about being a public sector, a citywide endeavor for the airports over in America particularly. So once you've got that relationship with what is essentially a city operator, why does it have to be constrained to just airports? It doesn't, does it? You can talk about your parking when you're going to like you say, to the sports game, to the theatre, whatever it might be. If you've got this relationship with your provider, which is also your city, and you're talking about a public sector relationship with a passenger or a citizen, this can be applied across the board. And have you got any thoughts on that, or any hints as to where we might be headed?
Well, I think absolutely. I think airports are perfect places because they're essentially little cities to be able to test out smart city approaches to problems that are faced by the larger community and region. So regions that have multiple airports, I'd love to see them combine and test out approaches to congestion. So when it comes to parking and vehicles, there's huge congestion issues, not so much now, again, in COVID, but they will return. And the cities have been looking at curb spaces as revenue generating opportunities, not just parking spaces. So the traditional parking could be done in a better way. I don't know if this has happened to you, but I have forgotten to move a car that needed to be moved by a particular time in the afternoon because they turned it from a 2-lane into a 4-lane thoroughfare. And trust me, that tow is very expensive. That is something that you do not want to get towed if you can avoid it. Wouldn't it have been nice if somebody said 30 minutes to you have to move your car, and I was able to break the meeting, come back and move it and avoid the fine and the hassle. The curb space at an airport is very, very high value. And the challenge is, how do you migrate during COVID and post-COVID the use of that curb space for both concessionaires, loading and unloading, as well as meeters and greeters that are meeting their loved ones or dropping off their loved ones or passengers. So is there a way to either make that a revenue generating physical space, or no, and also direct TNCs and caddies and whatnot to the appropriate places for drop off and pickup? So there's a management of the curbside that is something that could be then done at an airport and then moved back to the city as a whole. It's a great place to quickly test things, see what works, see what's acceptable, what the business rules are, and then be able to push it back into the larger city or section of the region.